maybe taking a little bit of a temporal shift here, going back in time and asking a little bit about your understanding of, maybe if you can explain a little more about what the legal system looked like in the era of the Qin Dynasty when the Terracotta Warriors were actually created. So what was the legal system like at that point in time?
Well, you know, as I say to my students all this, as I say to my students all the time, I'm older than dirt, and so a lot of times when I talk about American legal history of things I lived through, but the Qing Dynasty is one thing I did not live through, and so I'm glad to say that. I'm also, it's refreshing to be on a panel that's not talking about the election. So, but anyway, I realized that's the first thing I sat down with. But and certainly I do not consider myself an expert in the realm of someone like in the league of someone like Chang Wang, who teaches Chinese law at our law school. But I do have some comments I'd like to share with you about the legal system of the Qing Dynasty, which is, to refresh your memory, was about 221 to 206 BC. And during the Qing Dynasty, the legal system was designed to support the state, the emperor, and the military. And the legal philosophy of this period is termed within Chinese history and philosophy as legalism. Now, we think of legalism in a different way, but at that time in Chinese history, that's how they defined legalism. And legalism was a utilitarian political philosophy that did not address the natures and purposes of life, but rather it emphasized pragmatism over precedent and custom as the basis of law. It was a very, very pragmatic system. However, paradoxically, the philosophy also prevailed that it was very reform-oriented and very innovative. And the legal philosophy of the Qing Dynasty was the one that aimed at strengthening the government and reinforcing the adherence to the law. And the legalists emphasized that the head of state, the emperor, was endowed with the mystery of authority, and thus his decisions and decrees must always command the respect and obedience of the people. And like when I wrote these notes, I felt like sending that to the dean at the University of Minnesota Law School and said, maybe you'd like to share this with the faculty. But anyway, but the basic message of the legalistic theory was that the country comes first, not the individual. And also this is kind of, when you think about it, what happens during the Cultural Revolution. Also, that philosophy prevailed many, many years later. But in regard to the emperor himself, and we have to remember the tomb was built for the emperor, the legalist philosophy was held that he should not appear arrogant and should solicit guidance from military leaders, his counselors, his minister, and that he didn't need to adhere to that guidance, but he had to set the image that, yes, I am listening to my advisors. And so it emphasized that, that even though he was supposed to, that even though he commanded obedience, he was willing to listen to the people. And although the ruler was expected to be paternalistic, that also the philosophy emphasized that the emperor could not be too gentle. He could not spoil the people. It was kind of, spare the rod, spoil the child was not a good philosophy. And it was deemed in that society that punishment, when deemed appropriate, needed to be swift and harsh. And the Qing Dynasty mandated that this punishment really fostered social cohesion, and that it mandated that the populace should never escape punishment, that there needed to be consistent punishment when it was needed to be enforced. And but also in the legalist mind, the lone individual had no legitimate civil rights, and any personal freedom had to strengthen the ruler. Any personal freedom had to strengthen the ruler and the country. So for example, if a farmer was allowed to grow certain crops, that was allowed so he could grow crops that would that would generate taxes, and would generate income that would strengthen the country, would strengthen the emperor. Not that it would strengthen the farmer himself, but that would be good for the community as a whole. And legalism also but legalism did allow the common man to get ahead. And the military was probably one of the easiest venues for upward mobility. And I think that when you look at the Terracotta Warriors, and I think when you look at their faces, you can see some are very aristocratic, very refined features. Some have, for lack of a better word, perhaps coarser features, that they really, and some look very Mongolian, some look very, very different from that. And so if you look at the warriors themselves, the warriors themselves, who were all officers, and many of them were officers, they also depict a wide breadth of the population of China. And just kind of finally, and although the Qing Dynasty was a time of absolute imperial power, the era of legalism in the Qing Dynasty also brought very innovative reforms to China. And to weaken the power of the feudal lords, the emperor divided the empire into 36 administrative provinces and standardized the writing system. And all official decrees and other administrative matters had to be put in writing within a very short specified period of time. And I always think about, this was the Qing Dynasty. They didn't start doing that in Britain until the 1300s. It just shows once again how, and it really, when I was reading this is the common law. You put things in writing. This is what made West. This is what made Thomson. It all started in the Qing Dynasty. If only they had had technology. And I mean, the kind of technologies we have today. And the law was codified, and it was also made available to the public. And although the laws were harsh, unlike in other times, in other civilizations, the rules were clearly articulated, and consequences for disobeying the rules were equally well defined. In addition, under the legalism philosophy of the Qing Dynasty, the system of law ran the state, and the emperor's power derived from the authority which was provided to him under law. It was very clear what power the emperor had. So even if you had a weak emperor, that emperor could be very strong, because he himself did not have to assert her authority. It was all in the law. So that it was a way of really empowering the emperor without the emperor having to empower himself. And the Qing Dynasty was a dictatorship, but one that was clearly regulated by clear laws and procedures, unlike many oppressive regimes, which we've seen in recent history, which were very chaotic and had no system of law. So I think that you have to think about the Qing Dynasty, that was really a very dictatorial, very harsh time. It was also, in many ways, very advanced.